Hello, Crucible Church. If you haven't met me before, my name is Dan Forrest, and I'm a pastor at a church on Vancouver Island, north of Nanaimo, which is why I cannot be with you here in person today. I have to send in these video sermons. Unfortunately, I could not color correct my video very that well, and I've got this really red face, and I don't know why. Apologies for the bad connections. Anyways, I got connected to your church years ago when I was studying at Regent College, and I got involved in preaching about once a month at Crucible while I was at Regent, and then I did it for a few months and a year after that, so it was great. Well, Sam asked me to preach on Acts chapter 25, verses 1 to 12, as part of your Acts series that you're going through. But as I noticed, the schedule changed a little bit, and you've only gotten up to chapter 21. So I want to fill you in on everything that's happened in the 3 chapters before chapter 25, so that you can be caught up on all of Paul's adventures, so that my story makes more sense. Well, Paul has been on a missionary journey in Greece and Turkey. He's been sharing the good news of Jesus. He's been planting churches. He's been supporting churches along the way. And at the end of his journey, he arrives in Jerusalem. In Acts 21, he meets with James and the other elders there, and he shares what God has done among the Gentiles. Those are the non-Jews. They're excited to hear the news of what he's been doing and what God has been doing in his work, but they're also concerned. They're concerned because Paul's ministry to the Gentiles has created some fake news in the Jewish community. And this is what the elders report in Acts chapter 21, verse 21. They have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to our customs. What shall we do? They will certainly hear that you have come. So the big issue that some of the Jewish community has with Paul is they think that he is encouraging the Gentiles to completely turn away from the law of Moses. And it can seem like that's what he's doing. He does tell them that they don't need to be circumcised. He tells them they don't need to follow every aspect of the law. But he's not encouraging them to reject the law of Moses completely. He's actually encouraging them to follow the living law of God, Jesus, the one who embodies the law of Moses perfectly and empowers us to live it as well. So he's kind of pushing for something that's higher than the law of Moses, and that's Jesus and Jesus' way of life and all that Jesus teaches. And that doesn't include some of the things that were in the law of Moses because Jesus has superseded them. So James and the Christian elders, they encourage Paul to join 4 men in their purification rites and to pay for their expenses because they think that this act will demonstrate to the Jewish community that Paul does respect the law of Moses. But unfortunately, the plan doesn't really work out how they want it to. Before they could even complete the process, we read in Acts 21, verse 27. Some Jews from the province of Asia saw Paul at the temple. They stirred up the whole crowd and seized him, shouting, "Fellow Israelites, help us! This is the man who teaches everyone, everywhere, against our people and our law and this place. And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple and defied this holy place." So a whole crowd is stirred up. They drag Paul from the temple and they try to kill him. But Roman troops eventually intervene and they arrest Paul. Paul asks if he can address the Jewish mob, and the Romans let him. So he takes the opportunity to share his testimony, his conversion story from Acts chapter 9. And do you see what ended up happening here? The Jews from the province of Asia tried to squash the gospel. They tried to silence Paul. But what ended up happening is, in front of this whole crowd of people, Paul is given the opportunity to clearly and publicly share the good news of Jesus, completely opposite to what they wanted. Well, unfortunately, when the people do hear the gospel, they hear that it includes the Gentiles, and they just can't accept that. It's so deeply entrenched in them that this is not the right thing. So we read in Acts 22, verse 22. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, "Rid the earth of him! He's not fit to live." The Romans take Paul away. They prepare to flog him, to interrogate him, but Paul then reveals that he's a Roman citizen, and it's actually illegal for them to do this to him. So now that they realize he's a Roman citizen, they must have a proper trial. And they begin by assembling the chief priests and the Sanhedrin to find out why Paul is being accused. What has he done so wrong? And in front of this court, Paul declares in Acts chapter 23, verse 6, "I stand on trial today because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." And what Paul is doing is he's actually sparking a bit of a fire, because he knows that in the Sanhedrin there are some that believe in the resurrection of the dead, and there are some that don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. So when he says that he's standing on the hope of the resurrection of the dead, he starts this debate among the leaders in the Sanhedrin with each other. And that debate gets so violent that they have to escort Paul away. Things are getting way out of hand. And then while Paul is in prison, we read this in verse 11. "The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, 'Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome.'" So Jesus has led Paul to this moment in Jerusalem. He has given Paul these opportunities to share the gospel. And now he is telling him that he is leading Paul towards Rome. And this is very significant. Rome is the center of the Western world. It's the capital of the largest empire in the world. And God is giving Paul a tremendous opportunity to share the good news of Jesus with the whole world. But Paul has to get out of Jerusalem first. Unfortunately, there's a gang of 40 plus Jews that conspire to kill Paul when he's being transported between his barracks. But Paul and the Romans learn of this plot, and Paul is safely transported by night back to Caesarea, where his trial will continue before Governor Felix. And this is a map of the journey that Paul would have taken from Jerusalem, right in the heart of Israel, northwest to Caesarea, which is on the Mediterranean Sea. Caesarea was set up by the Romans as kind of their official place where they live in that area and delegate, and they kind of keep as far away from Jerusalem as they can, but they do have to deal with them, obviously, as they're ruling over the Jewish people at this time. Well, in Caesarea, the Jewish leaders come and they present the same case against Paul before Felix. Paul presents the good news of Jesus again before Felix in chapter 24. The gospel just keeps getting shared in the midst of all these trials. But unfortunately, nothing happens with that trial, and Paul is stuck in Caesarea with Felix for 2 years until someone takes over for Felix, and that's a new governor by the name of Festus. And Festus is the one we're going to be talking about the most in the sermon today. And that catches us up to our passage today, Acts chapter 25, verses 1 to 12. So Festus has a small role to play in Paul's story. He's only going to be here for this chapter and the next, but it's actually pretty significant what he does. He's new to this job, and so he pays a courtesy visit to Jerusalem. He goes to the Jewish leadership, and they see this as an opportunity to take advantage, to convince this new governor to do what Felix wouldn't have done for them, which is help get Paul unguarded on the road so that they can ambush him and kill him. That's their ultimate plan. Well, Festus doesn't know about this plan, and he doesn't really see a reason for why the trial should be in Jerusalem. It's actually easier for the trial to be in his home in Caesarea. That's where Paul is. That's where he lives. And after all, Festus is in charge. He's the new governor. He needs to step up and show some authority. So he's not going to let the Jewish leadership push him around. And he says, let's go back to Caesarea, and that's where we're going to have the trial. You come to my home instead of me coming to yours. So that's what happens. They go back to Caesarea, and Festus calls Paul in, and the Jewish leaders, they present their charges, but they have no evidence. This whole case is 2 years old. Paul really didn't do anything wrong, so they have nothing to show for it. And Paul insists, I have done nothing wrong against the Jewish law, or against the temple, or against Caesar. And here is where Festus tries to spice things up just a little bit. He's new to being a governor. He wants to get the Jewish leaders on his side, so he tries to help them out. He's asking Paul, would you be willing to have the trial in Jerusalem? Paul knows, though, that they're going to try and kill him along the way. They already tried this before, so Paul insists we got to stay in Caesarea. And at the end, as a Roman citizen, he has the right to appeal to Caesar, and he recognizes these trials are going nowhere. Send me to Caesar. Send me to Rome and have the trial there. Because if he has seriously done something wrong as a Roman citizen, he has the right, according to Roman law, to be tried in Rome. Not necessarily before Caesar, it would probably be under somebody else, but it could possibly be in front of Caesar that he has his case. Another great opportunity to spread the gospel. But at this point in the story, Festus has a choice to make. Is he going to do the right thing? Is he going to follow the Roman law? Is he going to send Paul off to face trial in Rome? Or is he kind of going to go the sneaky route? Is he going to give in to the Jewish authorities and hand Paul over to them anyways? Because Festus could just break all the rules here. And it's not uncommon for politicians to be corrupt. He could be thinking, oh yeah, this is going to grant me some favor with the Jews if I give them Paul. Maybe down the line there's some money for me. Maybe there's a bit of a quid pro quo where when I need something from them, they'll give it to me because I've done that for them. You know, he's thinking of his future, his political future. What's Festus going to do in this situation? Is he going to do the right thing, or is he going to kind of do the selfish thing and throw Paul under the bus? Well, after conferring with his council, he declares, you have appealed to Caesar you will go. And there you have it. Festus does the right thing. He isn't corrupt, he follows the law. Ultimately, he ends up playing a part in God's plans. Remember earlier, God told Paul that one day he would testify for him in Rome. And now, Paul is being sent to Rome by the Roman authorities. He doesn't have to pay for his own journey there. They're going to send him. Festus had a part to play in God's plans, and he didn't even realize it. You know, he could have gone against God's plans, or he could have gone with them. Well, because Festus did the right thing, because he followed the law instead of handing Paul over corruptly, now the gospel has a chance to be spread to the heart of the Roman Empire. So incredible. And this, as I was preparing for this sermon, it actually made me think of the latest Jumanji movies, which you're probably going to wonder, how in the world do these connect? Well, stick with me as I unpack this. I just watched these movies with my kids, and in the movies, these high school kids, they get sucked into a video game called Jumanji, where they have to complete the mission in order to escape back to the real world. The characters that they become in the games are these four people here, played by The Rock, played by Kevin Hart, Jack Black, and Karen Gillan. And these are the people that we, as the audience, we care about these four. We want to know what happens to them. We want to follow along on their journey. Just like in the book of Acts, we want to hear the stories of Paul. We want to hear the stories of Peter. We want to hear about Stephen and Philip. These are the heroes of the stories. Who really cares about Festus? Festus is only in this chapter and the next. He doesn't really do much. He's really just a side character. In Jumanji, there's another character who shows up named Nigel Billingsley. And just like Festus, no one cares about this character. He's only there at the beginning of the game to tell the heroes what to do, and then at the end to reward them for beating the game. Nigel has no influence in the story at all because he is an NPC. He's a non-player character. Nigel is computer controlled. He makes no decisions for himself. He's pre-programmed to say his lines and guide the players on their journey. And that's one of the jokes in the movies. Anytime someone asks Nigel a question, he always starts by saying, "Welcome to Jumanji, Nigel Billingsley at your service. I've been so anxious for your arrival." He says this every time someone talks to him. Well, Festus in our story can feel like Nigel. Does he really do anything? He's a side character just to push Paul along in his journey, predetermined by God to go preach in Rome. Festus seems like an NPC, but he's not. He's a human with free will that could have gone either way. He could have handed Paul over to the Jews to be ambushed by them. But of course, God would have probably intervened in some way to save Paul. But that didn't happen because Festus did the right thing. Festus had a choice to make, and he did the right one. But Festus isn't the hero of the story. He's a side character. And yet, he still had a choice to make. A choice that would have affected the story, that would have affected Paul's lives, God's plans. And he played a significant role in Paul's future and in God's plans because of that choice. Let's face it, most of us are side characters. There's only going to be a very few select people in this world who get to be the heroes, whose names are remembered and passed down in history. We like to think that we're the heroes because, sure, we have value and worth. We are important in God's eyes. But I'm sorry, we're not the heroes of the story. Our names and our stories will likely be forgotten in time. Now let me prove that to you. That sounds harsh, but it's actually true. I'm sorry. And I'm going to prove that to you now. You all have 4 grandparents. Can you name each one of your grandparents? You probably can. It's not that difficult. There's only 4 of them. You probably met them all and were raised by them and did things with them. You know all 4 of them. Sure, no problem. But now what about your great-grandparents? You have 16 of them. How many of those great-grandparents can you name right now? For myself, I only know 1 name for sure. 2 of them I can guess, but I'm actually not totally sure what they are. The only reason that I know that 1 name is because that guy was a famous preacher, and my family would talk about him all the time. He also shares a name with my dad, so that also makes it easier to remember. All the others, I don't know their names. I know nothing about any of those other 15 great-grandparents. They are not heroes. They are side characters, just like you and me. We will be forgotten in time. Our stories will be lost. Even with Festus, we have a little bit of a story, but we really know nothing else about him. And think about everybody else in Paul's stories as well. We only have a few names. We've largely forgotten all of these stories of people that Paul met, worked with him on the journey along the way. Even Jesus himself had hundreds of disciples, and we only know about 20 of their names. We don't know most of these people because we're all side characters, just like Festus. You're not the hero, but you're not Nigel also. You're not an NPC. Just because you will be forgotten does not mean that you have nothing to contribute to God's plan of salvation for this world. You are a vital part of God's redemption story. You might not be Billy Graham or Mother Teresa or C.S. Lewis, but when you think of those people, someone had to give them food, someone had to make their clothes, someone had to help them with their day planner. All of the great heroes needed side characters to encourage them, to work alongside them, to do the grunt work, the things that they didn't have time to do, or to do things that were similar to them but just didn't get the recognition. Just because you're not the hero doesn't mean you're not important. Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians about the body of Christ. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. You are indispensable. Do you believe that? You are indispensable. You might not be the brain or the heart or the noble parts of the body, but you are indispensable. And we have a choice, like Festus, to work with God's plans or to go against them. And even though our part to play might seem insignificant, it's not. Our actions and our decisions, they have eternal consequences. They will change the course of people's lives for eternity. In Psalm 139, David wrote this sermon for all of us to sing. It's not just for himself. So, as I read this now, I encourage you to read this as if it's you talking to God. God, you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Jesus didn't just die for the heroes of the story, he died for everyone. He died for you. You might be forgotten in time, but you are not forgotten by Jesus. He knows your name. He knows your story. He knows you more intimately than you know yourself because he knit you together in your mother's womb. He chose you before the creation of this world to be his son and his daughter. Your name is written in his book of life, and you will be welcomed into the resurrection at the end of time by name, welcomed by him, because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. We don't follow Jesus or serve other people for the praise of people. We do it because this is who God created us to be, and we get to join in on his great story. Even though we're just the side characters, we're not just the side characters, we're his side characters that he created for a purpose and for a plan. And he's given us everything that we need to do the work that he's encouraged and called us to do. And so as we do these things, as we go out and follow Jesus and be the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if you're working for the Lord, not for humans, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. That's from Colossians 3, by the way, that last part. I just want you to know, Jesus calls you by name. He knows who you are. He knows your story. He knows what he wants you to do, and he will equip you and present you and push you and encourage you to be all that you can be for his glory. You are not just an NPC, a robot, uncontrolled. You have a choice to make, a free will. And thankfully, if we step into that, we can see God do amazing, incredible things through our small actions every day. We get to be a hero, even though we're not remembered, even though we will be forgotten in time. Go with that encouragement. Go with that blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.